Greetings, everybody. See, Bulalang is on there. Welcome, welcome. As you can see, the mode is portrait, so I'm hoping we can get through this. Ben Brownlee and Bulalang, good day. Thank you for joining this evening. Thank you for joining. Yeah, the discussion today is about, this will be our last live stream for the year. Much has happened in the Jehovah's Witness organization. As the volume is low right now, let's turn it up. Let's turn it up. Thanks, Bolalang. How's that? Much better? Just tell me in the comment section if everybody can hear me, if it's good enough. Thanks, Ben. Thank you. All right, let's kick this off. I thought I'd do the live stream just to wrap up the year. Much has happened in the Jehovah's Witness organization, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society over the past year. A lot of events, a lot of changes, a lot of policy changes, and some very interesting developments. So we're going to run through some of the interesting ones, some tragic, of course, that we'll discuss. And feel free to throw your comments in the comments section, and let's have a chat. I think the first one I want to touch on, and this was a tragic event that happened in Hamburg, in Germany. I think this was in March when there was a mass shooting in Germany. I think we all heard about that. This happened on the 12th, 11th of March, I think. And this took place shortly after worshippers finished their service. Police have told them that they cannot rule. I'm just reading from a BBC article that came out after the attack. Now, I want everybody to know, everybody that's listening, that when these things happen, it's tragic. No kingdom melodies here, Bolelang, no prayer. Sorry. But yeah, when these things happen, it's tragic, and we in no way, I in no way condone any violence against Jehovah's Witnesses or any other group, religious group, political group, whatever. And the reason why, when these attacks happen, especially with Jehovah's Witnesses on that group, because it feeds into their persecution complex. Jehovah's Witnesses are, in no uncertain terms, told that these things will happen. You will get persecuted, right? And you should be able to accept this, and it's part of being a Jehovah's Witness. This type of thing happens, and it feeds into their persecution complex. Look at what happens in Russia as well. Now, Russia, there, the Jehovah's Witnesses are so-called persecuted. They've been given jail sentences. I think last week, I just read that I think it was three Jehovah's Witnesses were given 7 years and 6 year sentences for practicing the religion, because Russia sees their religion as an extremist organization. These things are discussed, and it only fuels into their persecution complex. So the Hamburg one was tragic. People were killed there as well. It's never a good thing when we hear reports like this of attacks on kingdom halls, on assembly halls. And this has happened all through the years. I think, when I was still years ago, there was an attack on a kingdom hall in Australia as well, where a bomb went off. So, these things are never good to read about. In addition, There was also the attack in India. I think there was a bomb, deadly blast in India, in Kerala, I think it was, yeah, where more than 50 Jehovah's Witnesses were injured, and I can't remember how many people were killed. I think 3 or 4 people lost their lives there in that attack. Which is never nice to see. I think they arrested the man. He was named Dominic Martin, said he carried out the attack. They arrested him. He was a 48-year-old who actually posted his confession on Facebook that he actually, attacked did the attacks. And of course, he was a disgruntled former Jehovah's Witness, as the reports go. And yeah, never good thing. So that shook those 2 incidents in terms of Jehovah's Witnesses losing their lives. I think that shook the ex-Jehovah's Witness community as well as the Jehovah's Witness organization. But as I said, we don't condone that type of behavior whatsoever. We can respectfully disagree and point out their doctrinal flip-flops and their destructive practices in terms of disfellowshipping, shunning, which is a big thing. Of course, we can respectfully point that out, and try to wake people up from the organization like that. But it's never a good thing to physically harm these people, as I said, because they see it as persecution. It's something they expect to happen. So it's not really a way to deal with it. And look, I think with a lot of these people, that the former disgruntled members, mental illness creeps in because of shunning. We know that many Jehovah's Witnesses, after being shunned, disfellowshipped and shunned, are isolated. They lose friends and family. Their whole support system disappears. And a lot of them eventually, unalive themselves, which is never a good thing. So those were the 2 tragic events. As I said, lately with Russia also sentencing a few Jehovah's Witnesses to prison terms. I know they banned in Russia, and it's never a good thing to see. Yeah, definitely. And I think one of what was really shook the Jehovah's Witnesses, the ExJW community, this year was, of course, the deletion of one of the governing body members, Tony Morris. That was a big one. That was very unexpected, I think. We woke up to the news of Tony Morris is no longer a member of the governing body. It was just an announcement on jw.org. And then, of course, speculation was rife. What happened? What happened to the man? And there were all sorts of rumors flying around about the cause for his deletion. And I think this is a very interesting one, because I recently made a video about, and a lot of people, it was interesting to see that a lot of people did not know that there were previously, apart from Anthony Morris, there were 3 other governing body members that were deleted. And I'll name them and we'll just touch on it briefly. First one was Edward Chitty, that was in the 1970s. Leo Greenlees was also one that was deleted or asked to resign. And those, the first 2 that I mentioned there were rumors of abuse and homosexuality that surrounded those cases. And of course, back then, remember, we did not have social media and the platforms we have now. So it was easier to cover up these things. Remember, we saw the governing body as this, we never saw these people. They were featured in Watchtower magazines. Life stories were featured now and again. But they were very far from us. We never got to see these people. And I think jw.org broadcasting, when they changed over to broadcasting and giving talks on the internet and on their platform, I think people started realizing, but these are people just like you and I, normal people. They are not these anointed men that we all saw. They were just normal people, So I think that was a double-edged sword for them in terms of that move. Yeah, and then as Bolalang mentions, Raymond Franz, I think he was the most famous one. I think his case, in terms of Raymond Franz, was a situation where he had a crisis of conscience, where he was going against the teachings and historical narratives that the governing body was putting out. He was a member of the governing body, and his investigations did not go well, and he's speaking out against the governing body did not go down well with the body as a whole, and we all know how that ended up. Franz was also asked to leave. He eventually was disfellowshipped. He went on to write two books. The first one was Crisis of Conscience, and the second one was called In Search of Christian Freedom. And I remember when I was still at the time when this happened, this was in the 80s. This was also a very hush-hush. You would hear murmurings in the hallways that there was a governing body member that left, and that was part of, they called it back then, the evil slave. He was influenced by Satan and so forth. But years later, when I started having my doubts, I think one of the first books I picked up and read was Crisis of Conscience, and I think that book woke a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses up that were questioning. It certainly did help me, because it actually confirmed a lot of the doubts that I had back then as well. And Francis' book was very well written, and I think when I finished that book, I said, that's it. I can't carry on in this organization anymore. So France was the third one, and the most well-known one. But as I said, he didn't have, the only reason he was deleted was because he had a crisis of conscience, and he went against the governing body's narrative of their doctrine and the dogma, because he found out, especially with their 1914 teaching and the destruction of the temple, 607 and 607 BCE, the dates that were given and still pushed up until today by Jehovah's Witnesses, when archaeology, debunks that date. And, Franz was one of them. He said, we can't go on with this date because it, archaeology debunks that. So Franz was a very good one, a big one for us. And then, of course, who would have known in 2023, Tony Morris, tight pants, Tony Morris, overnight deleted. And of course, we still don't know the true reason behind it. A lot of speculation, a lot of, things being thrown around why, alcoholism and whatever. So yeah, we'll probably never know. Maybe in a few years' time we will know what happened. But he's still a member in good standing as far as I can see. I mean, I think he was relocated to a congregation. What I heard, that the organization put him up in a house, him and his family. So he's still a member in good standing, but he's not just it's just that he's no longer a member of the governing body. So that was a huge shock, and that shook up the ExJW community for a bit. So that was a big one. And then we got to the no more timekeeping issue that was raised or announced at the annual meeting, I think it was, of Jehovah's Witnesses, where Samuel Hurd said that they will no longer be required to hand in time and reports of their activities during the month. Now, this was a big one, because we all know, those of us who are former Jehovah's Witnesses, we all know how we were hounded for that. Every end of the month, you got to hand in your time, your report, and the report stated how many hours you spent in the ministry, how many magazines you saw, you placed, how many watchtowers you placed, how many books you placed. That's what they called it, placed. Eventually, it was sold in the beginning, and then the arrangement was changed for donations. And a lot of people don't know that the background to why the organization made an announcement that we do no longer charge at the door for the magazines, was big, and rather ask the householder to give you a donation. And that was because donations are not taxed. And what happened during that time was a big televangelist at the time, Jimmy Swaggart, the IRS took him to court and nailed him for not paying tax on his literature and his cassette tapes, and he was being sold. So he ended up in court. And lo and behold, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society signed as friend of the court in the Jimmy Swaggart case. And that was because they knew if they would win the case, they would carry on charging for literature at the doors and selling the literature. But we all know how that ended. Jimmy Swaggart lost the case. He had to pay the IRS, I don't know how many millions in taxes. And immediately after that, the announcement came out at the Kingdom Halls that we would no longer be charging for the magazines at the door, but rather you would ask the householder for a donation, which was very disingenuous of the organization because they wanted to avoid being nailed on the tax issue. And that's why I always say, tax the churches. It's a business, definitely. So that's the governing body shakeup that happened, and then of course, as we were talking about the no more counting time, so we see Jehovah's Witnesses standing on corners with the carts. The carts are still there, but one thing was very interesting that I noticed about the cart ministry, they call it now the cart ministry, was I remember in my time as a Jehovah's Witness, when we used to do street work, when there were no carts, magazines on the street, we approached people in the streets, and offered the magazines to them and sold it to them. But with cart ministry, they do not approach people. They display the magazines and the literature in the carts, and they sit down there. And if people approach them, they would, offer them some of the literature and talk to them about the organization and the Jehovah's Witness religion. So that was interesting. But now the fact that there's no more time they are not required to report time anymore was a huge change for the Jehovah's Witnesses in 2023. Because remember, how many hours you spent in the ministry, especially as male Jehovah's Witnesses, how many hours you spent in the ministry, in the house ministry, was a measure of your spirituality. And that's how you would become appointed as a ministerial servant, or you would be appointed as an elder, and so forth. So your spirituality was measured on your hours you spent from house to house. All right. That's how they measured spirituality in the organization. So it'll be very interesting to see how, going forward with this new arrangement that reports are no longer required, how appointments in the organization are going to be handled, because there's no longer a yardstick or a measurement, so to speak, of your spirituality and how spiritual you are due to the amount of hours you spend going from door to door. So that is a new thing. So I think that was also a big shock. Samuel Hurd announced that at the annual meeting. And there's an article I found online which is very interesting just after this announcement was made, and it was a article, WIBX, those American people, I think this is a US radio station, interviewed a Jehovah's Witness representative on this new change. And Patrick De Bono, I'll read out of the article. Patrick De Bono is the local spokesperson for Jehovah's Witness Public Information Department, and he spoke Friday morning on WRBX's Keeler show about their new cart ministry outreach. De Bono says that cart ministry involves kiosks at popular locations in the city. Instead of reaching out to the public, they're available for the public to reach out to them. He goes on to say the new strategy won't preclude door-to-door ministry, which is what Jehovah's Witnesses are known for. Jehovah's Witness members will still go door-to-door. However, this program is going to where the people are. So, and I quote from what he says, when we're in our door-to-door ministry, we're initiating the contact. It's our approach to them, said De Bono. However, with our new cart activity, we don't approach them. He added that they still acknowledge people and say hello, but this ministry basically waits for the people to approach them. De Bono says that in the Utica area alone, over 220 people have been trained in the new outreach program, including people who speak several different languages. Now, very interesting, and this, the article states that when they got this representative on the radio show, they asked him to come in. He gave the questions to the producer. And I'll read you what it says. When asked about the topic and the local former members who are speaking out against the religion, he referred us to their website and people who are above his pay grade. De Bono asked that we not take phone calls from listeners during the interview. And here are the approved questions that are allowed on the program. Number one, what does the kind of outreach involved? How is this different from what Jehovah's Witnesses have done in the past in their door-to-door ministry? Why have Jehovah's Witnesses brought this type of outreach to Utica? Is this kind of cart outreach ministry being done elsewhere? What have been the results locally? And will Jehovah's Witnesses still come knock at my door? So those are the questions. And he said in no uncertain terms, these are the questions you ask. These are the questions I'm going to answer. Anything to do with former disgruntled members and CSA abuse issues, I will not answer, which speaks volumes. And I want to tell you a story about, this is very typical of what they do. Years ago, when I left the Jehovah's Witnesses, I wrote my first book, It was called Losing the Faith. And this book got a lot of traction, especially here in South Africa. And I was asked to, a lot of television shows asked me to be interviewed on their shows, which I went. Radio shows interviewed me, and I spoke up about the organization and my journey, because my first book, Losing Faith, is about my journey through the organization. And I remember the one show that I was invited to appear on was called African Views. And African Views was a international broadcast show. South African broadcast, SABC, broadcast this show internationally. And I was asked to go because the show was going to be about cults. And I was invited on the show, and other former cult members, and the former head of Scientology South Africa was also on the show, Ryan Hogarth, who subsequently left Scientology. And the producer of the show said to me, "Hey, Mr. Jackson, we would like to have you on the show, but we would also like to have a representative of your former church or your former faith on the show as well. Is that okay?" And I said, "Of course that's okay. I would love to be on a show with them where we discuss this, where we can debate, the issues." And they said, "Cool, that's okay." They called up Bethel here in South Africa and says, "Hey, I'm so-and-so from African Views. We're doing a show on cults and stuff like that. We would like you to be on one of your representatives to be on the show to talk about your organization." And the person on the other end of the phone immediately asked, "Okay, what are the questions that you will be asking?" Right? And the producer says, look, this is a discussion panel. There's no set format. The way the discussion will go, that's the direction the show will go. You know, if issues are brought up, we will take the show in the discussion in that direction. The next question was, who will be on the show? And then they mentioned, of course, there's a former cult member from Nigeria, head of Scientology, Ryan Hogarth at the time. He was going to be on the show. And then they said Robin Jackson, who's a former member of your group. And when he mentioned that, he said immediately, they said, no, thank you. We decline the offer. So I knew that was going to happen. I was prepared. I would love to have sitting on national, international television and debate, their doctrines with them. But of course, I knew that was not going to happen. Of course, the producer got back to me and he said, listen, we tried to reach out to them. They refused. I said, I knew that was going to happen. But this brings up the issue that I want to mention is, if the Jehovah's Witnesses are so confident that they have the truth and it can stand up to scrutiny, right? Why are you so scared to debate your beliefs and your dogma and your doctrine on a television show with former members? Why? Or not even with former members, with other members of the public as well. Why? You have to, when you go on a television, when they go on a television show, it's got to be according to their rules. These are the questions that we need. You will ask us and nothing more, nothing else. That's how it always has been, That shows you that they are not confident in their doctrine. And yeah, if you're so confident that you have the truth, why are you scared to appear on television and debate people about your doctrine? Because as you say, you want to save as many lives as possible before Armageddon comes, happens. We've got to save us. So that's the perfect opportunity to go on television and try and convert as many people as you can on international television. But it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So yeah, that's the change, the big policy change that happened as well. No more reporting time, and the house-to-house ministry and their ministry. So that was a big change. And then, of course, the latest one, which was a big, big, big shock, and we call it Beardgate now, where Stephen Lett came out and announced that the brothers, the male Jehovah's Witnesses, are now allowed to wear and to grow beards. Yeah, that was, I think nobody saw that one coming. I'll just go to the chat section here. Bolalang says, yeah, just on that, I suspect the elders would still investigate whether the brother is doing enough in the ministry work. Yeah, sure. I think so too. I think there will still be, even though there's no more counting time, there'll still be a measure of, watching in the background. And as Balalang says, I think they want to control the narration. They work on a script. Absolutely. Absolutely. So they want to control the narrative if they go on a television show or on a radio show. They want to control the narrative. So that don't come ask us uncomfortable questions. We want to be seen as we know what we're talking about, and everybody else is just trying to show, what a destructive organization we are. So the Beardgate thing, I'm just going into the chats. It says the longer one is out of the Jehovah's Witnesses, the more TW says the longer one is out of the Jehovah's Witnesses, the more strange the religion appears. I was not born in, and I've been out for 34 years. Wow, TW, you're right. You are absolutely right. The longer you are in that organization, out of that organization, the more you see how stupid and strange, as you say, TW, how strange the religion is, and you wonder to yourself, how did I get caught up in this? You know, but you're right. You've been out for 34 years. Kudos to you. Yeah, kudos to you. Freedom is good. Yeah, we live our lives on our own, according to our own rules and our own boundaries now. Not not controlled by a so-called elite group of men sitting in their ivory tower, whom you and I have never met. And most of the rank and file of Jehovah's Witnesses have never met in their lives, but they allow these men to control them and every aspect of their lives. So yeah, Beardgate, that was a big one. Jehovah's Witnesses are now allowed to have beards. This is, yeah. And as former Jehovah's Witnesses, we all know that, how brothers were taken into the back room and counseled and hauled over the coals and privileges withheld because they had beards, Some were even, seen as bad association because they had beards, because of their appearance, just for a little bit of stubble, of facial hair. This was, yeah. It just shows you how, no remorse, and they go on to gaslight the rank and file, if this is brought up. But all these years, I was ridiculed for having a beard. I was seen as bad association. Now it's okay. And then Stephen Lett goes on to say, you still obey the governing body. It's God's appointed channel between God and men. You should listen to us. It's just really, really frustrating at times, and it angers you. It really does when you see how many lives have been destroyed because of things like this. It really is. It's destructive. It's very destructive. And I know from personal experience, I wanna relate the experience of one of when I was in the congregation, growing up here, a very good friend of mine. He had a skin problem, right? So he couldn't shave. If he shaved, it was, wow, his skin would break out in terrible rashes, and his face would break up in terrible rashes, and he had a very serious problem, and he went to the doctor, and they eventually said he should go and see a dermatologist, and the dermatologist said, do not shave, because this is it's a constant thing. You should just let your beard grow and keep it trimmed, neat, but do not shave. And because of that, he was hauled into the back room and ridiculed and counseled because he had a medical problem. He had a medical issue, and he couldn't, no matter how much this brother did in the ministry, because I remember he was very, very studious at times, very zealous at times, I should use that word. And he still wouldn't be appointed as a ministerial servant just because he had a beard, And eventually the brother, he left, and, because, what's the point? What's the point of you being so zealous and trying to reach out for, privileges in the congregation, and you are ridiculed just because of a medical issue that you had, So yeah, those are the things we had to contend with. Just going back to the chat room, TW says, I fell for a promise that the governing body could never deliver on, the promise of everlasting life. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, I mentioned this in a previous live stream I did about a year ago, where South Africa, and I think Bolelang would back me up on this one, where because of apartheid South Africa, and the oppression that the non-white racial groups in this country endured during apartheid. During the 70s and the 80s, the growth of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and TW, I'm going to get to the point I'm making here. I'm just going to, just want to get to this background. The growth in the Jehovah's Witnesses in South Africa was tremendous. It was was incremental, especially amongst non-white people. And here's the reason why. Number one was because of the oppression that people in South Africa suffered. The promise of everlasting life and a new paradise earth, seemed so inviting to a lot of people, who were under the apartheid regime. So a lot of people fell for that. They became Jehovah's Witnesses and looked forward to this new earth, this new paradise with no racism and everlasting life, which was something new to them, Remember the brochures and the magazines that were punted at the time, the depictions, the illustrations were so inviting. They deliberately did this because, portraying paradise on earth. It was a tactic, to draw people in, and it was successful, I remember going to the assemblies, the conventions, end of year conventions. There were thousands of people, at these conventions, different cities. And I've been to many of the cities in the different year-end conventions, the big, massive conventions. There were thousands of people there, 6,000, 7,000 people. Even in our little neck of the woods, in the what we call the Eastern Cape, there were thousands of people at these conventions. And that shows you how the organization grew in the 70s and the 80s because of that promise. And, it was a very inviting and prospect for, non-white people. Paradise, everlasting life, no racism, no oppression. And that, that drew a lot of people in with the prospect of everlasting life as well. So TW, yeah. And we all know now that was a huge lie, of course. Oh, for the promise. Bola Lang says, I know of a brother who refused to listen to elders about his beard. He wore it up to his death and was never used. He was considered a bad association. Yeah, there you go. Bola Lang is also, relating a similar experience. And I think there's many experiences like this in many congregations worldwide. Yeah. TW says the governing body could care less if a brother gets hair bumps and or keloids from shaving. Jehovah will take care of your bumps in the new system. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they don't care. In the new system, you won't have any more of those bumps. So shave and walk around with your keloids and your bumps and your ingrown hairs. Yeah, just shave because we can't have you walking around with a beard. Ridiculous. Yeah. Yeah, well, Lang says, what's funny about the Beardgate is how the organization pretended it did not say people should shave. Absolutely, absolutely. So the gaslighting in this organization is just off the charts. We didn't say it outrightly. Yeah. And I actually, when I made the video, I did a video about Beardgate now recently. And I started off the video with a video of Stephen Lett saying, I think it was a 2018 video, where he says, that we shouldn't stumble our brothers by wearing beards and stuff like that. Yes, Stephen Lett, you said that on video. If brothers wear beards, you might stumble somebody else. Yeah. So the gaslighting is just off the charts, and they forget that the internet remembers, and how they put things in their older publications. And I mean, we're speaking about personal experiences here, and there's many others like this in congregations worldwide. TW says, I started attending meeting in 1976, just after the 1975 fiasco. I was told the friends that fell away in 75 were spiritually weak. Yep. Yeah. We all know how that 1975 also blamed the brothers, blamed the rank and file for reading too deep. We didn't say 1975 was going to be the end of the world, but then you listen to talks, recorded talks. Yeah, it was certainly, how it was portrayed. I mean, rank and file sold up their homes, their vehicles, because homes and land, because the end is here, 1975. I think what the slogan was at the time, stay alive till 1975, or stay alive until 75. That was the slogan at the time, as I can recall a lot of brothers were saying. TW says, for the record, I have a beard. Oh, good on you, TW. Yeah. Bolalang says, there was racism in the organization. As an elder, I felt more appreciated in black congregations than in white ones. 100%. Yeah. Now, look, Jehovah's Witnesses pride themselves on this. And even here during apartheid South Africa, a lot of the congregations were still segregated, but they were allowed to mix. It wasn't all that mixed. Elders were allowed to serve in what we call non-white congregations and so forth. And some of us elders, some members were allowed to serve in predominantly white congregations. And I think that's the how they portrayed, the organization, that we are non-racial, for the most part. But as Bolalang says, that there was racism. I can attest to that too. I've seen that. And Bolalang was an elder, and he felt it. He used to give talks probably gave talks at different congregations, and that's why he's speaking on an experience. I can attest to that myself, that there was racism. And look, the history of the organization, the writings, the early writings are not so non-white friendly, so to speak. Yeah. Lang says, we were not used in white assemblies. True. And then TW goes on and said, when I was young, I asked an elder why beards were wrong. The elder said, do you plan to grow a beard? I said no, and dropped the topic. Yeah. It's just ridiculous. The rules, the unwritten rules in this organization, it was just so off the charts and just terribly controlling. As I said, there were written rules and there were unwritten rules, and it was just all about control. They wanted to control every aspect. Kevin K says, talk about unwritten rules, that is beards. ExJWs from many years past will remember how marriages and pregnancies were once frowned on. My parents were young, but to wait until after Armageddon. Oh, that's a very good point, Kevin, that you brought up there. I remember marriages and pregnancies. And you know what? Well, they were encouraged, young people were encouraged not to get married or go into the ministry, rather, full-time ministry. Or if you get married, hold off on having children. Because, you don't want to bring up a child in this old system, this bad system of things. Wait until the new system. And in the congregation I was in, I know of a sister that lived by that. She never got married. She's my age, back then we're youngsters, and she lapped that up. She never dated. Although she liked a few, one brother in particular in the congregation, but she never dated. She was a full-time pioneer. And because of that narrative, because they were encouraged, wait until the new system, paradise earth, rather, don't get married, or if you have to get married, don't have children. And a lot of married Jehovah's Witnesses did that. I know quite a few who never had children, you know, never had children, and they're too old now, of course, to have kids. But that's sad. The level, as we said, the control in this organization with every aspect of people's lives is destructive. It's just devastating. Yeah, Kevin K goes on to say that is until Nathan Noor got married and the wedding floodgates opened. Yeah, that Kevin K, that's a very interesting point because somebody mentioned the whole Nathan Noor fiasco to me the other day on one of my videos that I've had on my channel about the governing body, 4 deleted governing body members. As I said, he was celibate, supposedly for a while, and then he got married. And they said that's something I should investigate. So now that you bring it up, it's something I'll definitely investigate because, yeah, I think after when he got married, the wedding, as you say, the wedding floodgates opened, But another thing with youngsters in the organization, and I did a video about this dating in the Jehovah's Witness organization. Of course, you can only date within the organization. And as a friend of mine says, the choices, if she's watching, she knows what I'm talking about. The choices are limited. The pool is limited. But anyway, a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses youngsters get groomed by families. Almost like arranged marriages. They'd like to hook their daughter or their son up with that one's daughter or son, right? So that's what happens in many cases, and they get groomed into this. And of course, they get married very young, to avoid a lot of issues. So that's also an issue in the organization. Kevin K says, before that, my mom was embarrassed to go to the conventions when pregnant. Got lots of dirty looks from the more theocratic folks. Wow. Yo, that's sad. She got dirty looks just because she was pregnant? Wow, Kevin, that's, yeah. Just shows you how, yeah. Jehovah's Witnesses can be very condescending, eh? They can be very condescending to each other at times, If you're not in a certain